Nu tā, draugi, esam atpakaļ.
So, friends, we are back. I hope you have managed to note down yet some other things that you want to ask and had some coffee. Now, let us resume to digital environment.
Here, being, I understand, live from Oslo, isn't it? So
Yes, sir.
it's almost like a Eurovision Song Contest, isn't it? But you actually have so many jobs. Should I name just some of them? You work as also professor for Metropolitan University in Oslo, but in the same time, you are also the kind of evangelist for these equal opportunities, and even created your social entrepreneurship in your own country, right? So, nevertheless, the big issue that you are going to open, and we will follow with some explanations later from the Latvian experience, is this universal design principle for IT technologies. So would it be an internet, but not only, we are almost living in the things of internet, in almost in a 5G reality, which will kind of create new opportunities, and we should never create new obstacles. We should open doors. So does these technologies always open doors, or sometimes for some people, for example, those with disabilities or any other groups, maybe it actually creates new and new obstacles instead of, well, like dismantling them. So, Anthony, how it looks like from the freezing Oslo?
Yes, it is cold and dark this time of year. And thank you for that warm introduction. It was so nice to hear, the concepts and the ideas that I care about so much kind of, resonated back to me. So this is very exciting for me. I love working with this group. I've gotten to work with you guys for a few years now. So it's very exciting for me to kind of be back and be able to continue to talk and develop these ideas together. So let me just pull up my presentation. There we go. So every day, as you can imagine, someone like me uses technology without much of a problem. I can pick up most phones, apps, computers, and, it's just right at my fingertips. I got the knowledge, I got the background, I got the experience. But every day, someone with a disability goes onto their bank's website, and they might try to enter some information into a form, and they can't do it because of the way the website's designed. And I want to be clear about that. This has nothing to do about the individual. We all exist along a huge diversity of experiences and abilities. The design of technologies has to be the focus of our ways of transforming society. So every day, an older person tries to go onto their doctor's website to book an appointment and struggles and sometimes fails to be able to book that appointment. Every day, a woman goes on social media and is harassed or experiences some form of hate speech. Every day, a woman tries to interact with her home devices by speaking to them, and the device doesn't recognize her voice to the same extent, to the same efficacy as it does her partner's or her husband's. And this is borne out in research. We know this to be true. This is not just my opinion. This is based on science. And every day, someone across the gender diversity spectrum experiences some form of harassment online. And of course, every day, social movements are born and die on social media as people try to advocate for their own rights and are continually oppressed by those in positions of power and authority. And of course, there's more and more and more to those stories. We could talk about language. We could talk about country of origin. I do tons of work in Uganda and Mozambique, and the situation I see there is very hopeful, very promising. But I do still see so many challenges that these individuals face, not because of the way things are, but because of the way we have designed them. We have control over our choices, and we can change those those choices and change our mindset to be more inclusive and to create a more universally designed world. And the whole point of this is to close some of these digital divides that exist. Again, going back to the scientific literature, we know that people with disabilities have lower levels of access to technology than people without disabilities. We know the same disparity exists, differences in men and women. Urban versus rural, low income versus high income, high education versus low education, and on and on and on and on. So universal design is this really compelling, really thought-provoking and challenging idea that we can use our decisions when we're creating something new to ensure that everyone can use that thing equally. And of course, the whole idea started in the US, but I like to think here in Norway, we've been able to reinvent it somewhat. And so what we've done is we've really located universal design into this way of approaching and eliminating inequality. And of course, universal design isn't just an American thing. It's not just a Norwegian thing. One of my businesses that I run is a universal design studio down in Kampala, Uganda. I've worked with universal design in China and Macau and Hong Kong. I've worked with it in Pakistan and India. I've worked it across sub-Saharan Africa, of course, in Europe and the United States. This is a global phenomenon that is actually changing the way people live. And it's a really profound approach to reducing inequality. And the one thing that I always kind of admire and appreciate is the fact that the UN, several of the UN agencies have taken on universal design as an important effort within their organizations and also as a tenet of human rights. So the definition of universal design is kind of simple and it's kind of scary in its simplicity because it seems like it's so easy, but it basically comes down to the design of, and we can put anything in that blank. We can put technology, we can put education systems, we can put healthcare systems to be usable by all people. And let's unpack those three key terms there, design. Now we can think about design in a couple of different ways. We could think about design as the way this pen is shaped, the materials it's made out of, the weight of the pen. We can also think about design as the process we use when we create this pen. So design can refer to a couple of things. And I don't want us to think when we think about design, I don't want us to only think about the design that's in the media. So in the media, if you go to Netflix and put design in, what you're going to find is a whole bunch of shows about graphic design or interior design. When we talk about design, I want us to have a multi-level approach to what design means. So when we talk about universal design, we're talking about universal systems design. So how are our education systems designed? We're talking about universal policy design. Who is designing our policies and what shape are they taking? We're talking about organizational design. So how do we design, what are the choices we make when we're creating an organization or reforming an organization? We're talking about universal product design and of course, universal interface design, which may be what a lot of people are usually understanding, that they usually understand universal design as about interfaces. It's not just about interfaces. Universal design takes a holistic approach to what design is. And then there's this term usable. We love to say things like, oh, that's really user-friendly, or it's really easy to use. But usable has a very precise definition that we use in universal design, and it comes down to three key things. Number one, can you effectively reach your goal? Number two, can you efficiently reach that goal? And number three, when you reach that goal, are you satisfied? Now, when I talk about effectiveness and I talk about reaching your goal, it's kind of like when you try to book a plane ticket online. Do you come away having booked that plane ticket? Or do you give up in the middle of the process because it's just frustrating and annoying? Efficient. How long does it take you to book that plane ticket? Are you able to go in, boom, 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 done, paid, and out? Or does it take a lot of backtracking and I got to go through this menu and then I have to check this thing and then, oh, this didn't come up the right way and now the form's all reset? How fast does it take? And then satisfying is my favorite part of the definition of usability. It all comes down to your subjective experience. My best story about satisfaction comes from my mother. Now, one day she was really excited because she wanted to buy a color printer so that she could print out pictures of her grandchildren and put them up on her refrigerator. And this was something that she really enjoys doing because then every morning she gets up, she makes her cup of tea, and she gets to see her grandchildren on the refrigerator. So she goes to the store, buys the printer, takes it home, plugs it in. And of course, the first thing that comes up is all these menus and prompts. And she gets a little bit confused and she tries to close things and tries to make it through. But she slowly starts to get frustrated. After a few hours of working on trying to get this printer to function, she got so angry and upset that she picked the printer up and threw it across the room. Now, my mother's not a weightlifter. She's not a big, burly person. She's a very petite, small woman. And she was raised in a part of the United States where they're known for their politeness and gentility. The way we design our technology should never force us to act in anger or aggression. And we've all had those experiences where we wanted to throw our phone out the window or pick up our computer and just smash it on the desk. We've all had those experiences. Those mean that you're not using something that's universally designed. Last but not least, all people. Another really fun part of this definition, because it sounds so easy. It's just everyone. It's just all of us. But the tendency here is that designers want to focus on this magical average person. And I want to tell you, everyone, the average person is a myth. It does not exist. We like to talk about the average person a lot, but there is no average people out there. I would challenge anybody in this audience right now to, if you think your average intelligence, ability, height, weight, education, everything else, if you're average, I want you to stand up right now, because I think you should be the model for everything we've designed. The reality is there aren't average people, and that science proves this. In the United States, back in the 1960s, they did a study on the Air Force pilots. So they wanted to design an airplane that worked for the average pilot. So they measured everybody, they took everybody's measurements, they averaged everything together, they made that airplane, and turns out nobody fit those average measurements. It did not work for anyone. The average person doesn't exist. So what we've done in the recent years is try to take this idea of universal design, the concept, and kind of merge it with some other practices that are already going on that we already know work really well when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And so what we've done is we've tried to articulate a set of 4 principles that help us take this idea and put it into practice. And those 4 principles come down to social equality, human diversity, accessibility, and participatory processes. Now let's run through these really quick so you got some idea what we're talking about. Social equality is one of those things we all kind of get, but I think it's worth pointing out that it means more than just not discriminating. If all you've done is just stopped discriminating against people, you haven't quite taken it the full way. And that's because what we want is for everyone to have an equal chance at success. And I use those words specifically, equal chance at achieving success. Because what my students tell me then is, oh, you want equality, so you're going to give us all A's in class. And I say, no, that's not how equality works. But I will make sure that you all have an equal chance at getting an A. So what we want, equal chances for success. What we have is that people are born into different positions of privilege and disadvantage. And those that are disadvantaged in society have to work doubly hard to ever have even the possibility of achieving success. And what that means is somebody who's born today, they might have close to 0% chance of achieving success in their life, not because of what they can do, their capacity is to do, but because of the way we've designed the world around us. So what we need is universal design to help equalize our chances for achieving success. Now, human diversity is another really great idea that I think we all kind of have a fundamental grasp of, but I want to pick this apart just a little bit because it's worth pointing out that we could think about life as a sort of video game. And people like me who come from a middle-class background and who have been able to get an education because of the way where I was born and who my parents were, we kind of have life set on easy mode. I've had some challenges, there have been some problems in my life, but most of the time, things have just worked out. Now, you change a couple of those variables, maybe the way I was born, the level of my parents' education, whether or not I have a disability, my gender, and suddenly you see that life starts to become on medium, that starts to be some challenges and barriers in society that we can fix, that we can resolve by designing the world in a little bit better place. Now I want to take it up a notch because when we deal with these disadvantages in one dimension, that's kind of medium mode. But if we want to look at this from hard mode, we have to start looking at the intersection of multiple disadvantages. So let's take an example of what that might look like. A woman with a disability will experience disadvantages because of her gender and her disability. And what that means is that her experience will be very different than a man with a disability or a woman without a disability. So we have to take into account the whole identity of the person. And this is the fundamental principle behind intersectionality. And we have to look at the ways in which society is designed and the systems of power and oppression that exist that limit someone's chances for achieving success. Now let's jump to accessibility. We've already talked about usability, effective, efficient, and satisfying, but it's important to point out that accessibility and usability are interconnected dimensions of universal design. We cannot separate these two things. It does no good to give someone access to the internet if they can't use a computer. So we need to take into account something like digital skills. And it does no good to give somebody access to a computer if they can't use a web browser or a website because of the way it's designed. Accessibility and usability, interconnected dimensions of universal design. Finally, the most important part of universal design, the key to unlocking all of the potential for universal design, are participatory processes. And what this means in today's world is that designers will bring some user groups into the design process towards the end to kind of test their product on those individuals. So they bring it into the implementation stage. But that's not participation. That's not substantive participation. What we need in universal design in order to say that it's participatory is to bring people in at the earliest idea stages of a design and continuously involve them throughout the process, all the way down to implementation. And you know what you get from doing that? A better product for everyone and a product that's more likely to be adopted by those communities that you want to adopt your product. So let's just recap real quick. Universal design is all about designing solutions that everyone can use equally. It's about designing solutions that eliminate barriers to participating in society across the entirety of the human diversity continuum. It's about designing solutions that are accessible and usable for persons with disabilities and everyone. And I want to point out here, I say specifically persons with disabilities because they are most often the ones who are left out of this conversation. They're the ones who we assume cannot use or access technology. And I want it to be clear that they absolutely can if we design those technologies that are usable for them. And of course, designing solutions in collaboration with all relevant stakeholders. So here's a couple of practices that we can use to kind of get the ball rolling. First of all, we can just start with basic levels of education and awareness. We need designers who are trained and who understand and are aware of social inequalities. I would challenge anyone in the audience, find me a computer science program that has an explicit course dedicated to understanding inequality. I would say there's not one in the world. There's not been one in my experience. So we need designers who understand, who are educated in issues of social inequality. We need designers that can eliminate and identify barriers that marginalized groups experience when it comes to participating in society. We need designers that can adhere to international standards for universal design and test for accessibility and usability. And finally, we need designers that can work with stakeholder groups, especially marginalized communities, from the idea stage to the implementation stage. If you want to know more about universal design, please check out our website, universal.design. You can access it through this QR code. We have a free Intro to Universal Design course on that website, so I would encourage anyone who's interested in this kind of work to check that out. It's really fun and amazing, and I know the teacher who teaches it because it's me. And if you like this presentation, please connect with me online. I'm all over the social medias. I'm Dr. Anthony or Dr. Anthony G on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm on TikTok now, and I just got my 3,000th follower. So if you like TikTok, check me out there as well. Again, Dr. Anthony G. Thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to connect with you folks. It means a lot to me.
It's more than maybe few. We are a small country, rather. We cannot provide you 3,000 more followers like in 1 minute, but I definitely like to ask in what proportions you see that universal design principle now attracts, influences, does anything with whole society itself in Norway. I'm asking this because of up until now in Latvia, when we speak this language of universal design, we kind of more or less, let's say, in 2/3 of situations, so 60% are actually dedicated to people with disabilities. So how do you include in this concept in everyday life all the other social groups in society? Because they should be included, I suppose so, isn't it?
Absolutely. By definition, they should be included. And it's such a great question because the historical, the history of universal design is rooted in disability rights. It's also rooted in architecture. So we've had to break with some of those traditions because we want to carve a path for the future that is inclusive of all groups. And when we start looking at this concept of intersectionality and how multiple identities can overlap with one another, then we can't just say that universal design is a disability issue. It's a human issue, but it's a human diversity issue. What one of my students always says, and I've stolen this phrase from her, is that in user-centered design, it's only good as the user that's at the center of that design. And if you put someone like me at the center of a design process, what you're going to get is more technology that works for people like me. But if we want to reach the most marginalized groups in society, we have to put them at the center of universal design. And in doing so, we're going to reach all the other groups, including me.
Of course. Listen, we have a special group. They are called here in Latvia. You'd like to know them because they are so innovative, so active, and they did a lot of these changes, especially in these IT designing structures and thinking, even philosophy, at least here in Baltics, in the other side of the Baltic Sea. And they are called Riga Tech Girls. One of these super girls is here. This is Marina Petrakova. She is the co-founder of this, I would even say, movement, isn't it? Marina, now we switch back to Latvian language. I'm sorry for this. I just forgot that we should communicate in our state language. So thank you anyway, Anthony, and sveika, Marina. Tad jūs esat viena no tām